Today, let's look at the 3x3 cube, or the Rubik's Cube as it's better known. I've gotten obsessed with this over the break recently, and I have started to speed up my times by focusing on the CFOP method to try to take my time from something longer down to something shorter. So, let's explain CFOP a little bit before I get into my demo solves. Each of these letters stands for a part of the process. The C stands for building a cross on one of the layers. Traditionally, when you're starting out, you will build this on the white layer, and this card here just shows the scramble that I start with. When we're looking at the cube, we want to start building the cross with the white side down, so that as you build it in, you can kind of see ahead and start working on the F2L, or first two layers, after the white cross has already been finished. You do that by finding the edge and corner pieces and slotting them in. Next, you start to orient the last layer, which means pulling the yellow pieces to all face up. That's irregardless of where any of the pieces actually are on the edge, because that comes to the last step, which is called the PLL, or permuting the last layer. So let's talk through about how you would do the scramble to start your solve. You start with the white face up and the green face facing you, which means yellow's down, red is right, orange is on your left, and blue is on the back. Each of the letters corresponds to a face, so front, up, down, left, right, and back. And when there is a 2, that means that you turn that face twice. If there is a prime marked by it, that means you turn the face counterclockwise instead of clockwise. So now let's start to build the cross from this example. First, we're going to turn the cube upside down after looking for all of those white faces. Once we have them, we're going to figure out how we're going to put them down so that we can solve for this. I am still pretty new at this, so it takes me a little bit, but once we have those down, then we work on the white corner pieces and matching them up with their second layer. So we want to match a piece that has white on the bottom to a piece that has the two corners also. So that would be like red and green, green and orange, etc. And as you can see, once we've paired those up, the bottom part of the cube is solved. So now we need to make the yellow face match up. So now we're going to do the OLL. And this is an algorithm that turns all of this up. And finally, we have to permute the last layer. So we have 2 that need to be swapped so that all the edges are correct. So we do that, and as you see, we just have to switch all the side pieces, and boom, our cube is solved. So again, that's CFOP. So cross, F2L, OLL, and PLL. Now, I'm going to get into my solves that I did over the course of about an hour using this GAN cube. So we're switching to a GoPro footage here. And as you'll see, this is sped up quite a bit so that it's not just boring to watch me solve for an hour straight, especially since I am fairly slow. So the stats that are shown on the screen here, we're showing the total time it took me to solve. We're showing the number of moves I made. The TPS stands for turns per second, and as you can see, I am moving fairly slow. 1 point anything is pretty bad. And the rotations are how many times the cube has turned. This cube has a gyroscope in it, and so it can tell how often that it's being turned around and what the orientation is. But one of the problems with that is anytime I do one of the M-slice moves, where the middle slice of the cube moves instead of one of the edges, it counts that as a rotation. So any of the times, especially on the last stage where I'm permuting the final layer, where I use an M-slice, you'll see my rotations jump up into the high teens or even 20s. Now I'm using the GAN 356i version 2, and the robot thing that's scrambling it for me is the GAN robot. I'm connecting that to the app, and the app is doing the scrambling for me so that I don't have to sit here and scramble myself for an hour straight. Now, obviously that was a little more expensive, but I splurged because I'm really enjoying this hobby and wanted to take it more seriously and focus on speeding up. So when I was doing my layer by layer method, which was, usually called the beginner method, I was getting around 2-minute solves. And as I focused on finger tricks and getting faster, I was able to pull that down to somewhere around 1:30 at the absolute best. And that was getting pretty lucky with a scramble where some of the last steps were basically skipped. Once I started learning F2L, especially the intuitive F2L, I saw my times start to average out, but they weren't getting much faster. And so that's where I've dug into the OLL and PLL algorithms. There's only a handful of them. There's something like a dozen that you have to learn, and I'm still kind of stuck on 3 or 4 of them right now, but I don't think many of those came up during this solve. the times where it did, you'll see my times, shoot up. But my average time has dropped down to around a minute, which I'm pretty happy with considering I just started on this journey about a month ago at this point, and I really only started learning CFOP a couple weeks ago. I have to give a lot of thanks to other channels on YouTube like JPerm for doing just really awesome tutorials of how to learn this stuff. Some other channels that have been great are Brody the Cuber and Z3 Cubing. They both have some great tutorials as well, and I've really leaned on them as I've gotten a little bit frustrated with some of my speeds kind of not picking up as I'm getting these algorithms learned a little bit better. So I'm trucking along here. My personal best of all time right now in a single solve was 47 seconds. And I got really lucky with that one in terms of I didn't have a last step at all. I pulled up that solve and it was exactly 47.15 seconds. I had 68 moves, 12 rotations, and 1.4 turns per second. So the parts that I did really well was I solved the cross in 5 seconds. I got out of the F2L in under 30 seconds. And then the OLL and PLL, I had skips on both so that I didn't have to do the full 2-look OLL. I just had to do the 1-look kind of finishing. And in the PLL, I just had to permute the last selection where I was just fixing the edge pieces, but all the corners were already set up. So I did both of those 2 steps in under 30 seconds, which gave me a pretty awesome time, at least for myself. I'm still pretty proud of that, but hoping to surpass it soon. Now, if you're tracking along with this, you'll see that I gave up on one of those solves and I gave it a DNF, which just means did not finish. I messed up one of the algorithms that I'm still learning and kind of just looked at it and said, oh man, I don't know how to fix this easily. So instead of getting like a 2-minute solve or something, I just backed out. And part of that is that, when I do that, sometimes I go through and solve it like I'm doing on this DNF. And other times I will just give up and say, I'd rather try another scramble rather than go through the time of fixing this one. There I am, very happy about a 51 second. As of now, that was my best time during this session. I think I ended on a little bit better time, but I'm really not moving very quickly, as you can tell. None of my turns per second are really over like 1.6 or 1.7 at their best. And what that means is that it's just taking me a long time to find things to pair up in the F2L, or it's taking a long time to find the pieces that I need or remember the algorithm in the later stages. And so that's something that I need to work on. There's something called look ahead that cubers really get good at, where you can kind of see the next move as you're solving the last one. And that's something that I really need to figure out. Currently, I have almost no look ahead ability, but I'm getting a little bit better at that with some of the cross to F2L. The other big thing I'm trying to get good at is just working on my finger tricks. I'm pretty slow at turning, and I can only usually make turns or adjustments one way versus being able to, make the U-turn from either index finger or do the D prime or D from, pushing or pulling the piece. So hopefully as I get better at that, my times will decrease as well. I think we're coming up on my last solve here in just a second, where I set a personal best for the day at least of 48 seconds, and I was very happy with that. And for that last solve, here is the screen, so you can take a look at that and recreate it for yourself, try it out, see how you do against me. But I was pretty happy with that for the day, and I decided to call it quits after a little over an hour of cubing. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you got something out of this. I'll be posting updates about monthly to track my progress as I move forward, and hopefully we'll all get better at cubing together. Bye!